and everything was expensive. And I thought, gee, maybe a mobile home, manufactured home would be a good thing to do. And that's what I did. About 2 weeks after I moved into the park, a little piece of paper came through my mail slot, and it said, "Come down to the clubhouse on Saturday. We're going to try and buy the park." I thought, this sounds like a good idea. So I went down there and started learning about that. And ultimately, we did buy the park. And we've now owned it for 13 years. And I can tell you that it's worked out very well. What I'm going to go through today is a bunch of stuff about where you can find mortgage money to buy your park, how you get organized, why do it, questions like that. So let's get started. Okay, so John, is this remote? Should be so no,
not working?
No.
You can use the keyboard up and down for one while I kiss me back.
Okay, okay. There you go. Battery's not included.
All right.
So let's see. So okay. An up arrow should do that, Don?
Yeah. Up or down, one of the other.
Where's the control up?
Okay.
That's not working.
Already. Yeah. Okay, now that's
I guess I can
yeah, okay, let's you want to be my slide operator?
I have to be.
Okay. So get me to my next slide. Okay, and give me the one after that. And we'll come back to this one.
Try one more time and then
Okay. Up should be taking me to the next one. Right?
Sorry about
down.
that. I don't want to trip anyone going over some.
Okay, here we go. Let's roll. Okay, so why do you want to do this? Why do you want to try and buy your park? Well, you want to do it for the first reason is to stabilize your housing expense for the long term. That's basically the reason you do it. And the reason you can do that is because when you own your park, you take away the profit motive. You're not out to make as much money as you can from the people who live in the park. You're out to keep rents as low as possible and to, while at the same time paying the mortgage that you have on the park, running the park properly, maintaining it properly, and putting some money inside for reserves for the future. So that's your goal. It's not to make a lot of money. How does it work out in actual practice? Well, the park I live in, which is called Aptos Knoll, when we bought it in 2005. The average rent in the park was $425 a month. And that was a county rent stabilization ordinance that had created that rent. When we bought the park, the people that joined and became part of the association, their rent went up to $550. So that's in February 2005. And it's never been more than $550 for the last 13 years. It's currently $534. And so we've obviously stabilized our rents long term. The other reason you do it is to secure the value of your homes, because as you know, as rents go up, that the value of your home goes down typically. So that's the important thing. Securing the value of your homes. Okay. Makes your homes easier to sell because buyers today are sophisticated and they realize, gosh, if I'm buying a house in a park that's owned by some landlord and I'm at cross purposes with that landlord, then, do I really want to live here? Is the question. So people have more confidence, and it makes your home easier to sell if you're in a community where the people have an ownership interest in the community. Okay. To make sure your park will never be closed. And of course, there are park closure ordinances in some areas that help make sure parks aren't going to be closed. But if you turn your park into a resident-owned community, it's affordable housing forever. That doesn't change. So that's another reason to do it. To improve your quality of life, because you aren't constantly in a conflict with some for-profit owner who's trying to make your life difficult. You know, often put as little as possible into the property while getting as much as he can out of you. And the other thing is, when you do this, you take control of your economic future. One of the biggest components of your economic life is your housing cost. So you get much better control over your economic future if you can control your housing costs, and that's what this does. Let's see here. Okay, why so few? About 150 parks in California are resident-owned. And the first one converted to resident ownership, I heard, in 1976. So why has it, over such a long period of time, have not more communities become resident-owned? Well, there are some reasons, as you can imagine. One of the key ones, and all these different reasons I'm going to show you sort of intersect. It's kind of like an automobile accident. There's usually not just one factor involved. There's multiple factors. So that's the problem here. Resident groups aren't organized. Everybody just wants to stay in their house and hide out. They're afraid if they stand up to the park owner, there's going to be retaliation, which is a legitimate fear. So the groups don't tend to get organized and stand together, and the park owners love that. The resident groups never even consider the idea. How can we do this? How can we buy our park? Is there, how could that happen? We don't have any money. What would be the plan? And park owners don't consider the idea either. Park owners never think about this. They don't think that, well, somehow or other this group could actually get mortgage financing and buy this park. It doesn't occur to the park owners. And the other problem is park owners prefer to sell to other investors. They prefer not to sell to resident groups. One of the key reasons is if a park owner sells to another investor, they can usually get the deal done within 45 days or so. When they're selling to a resident group, it's going to take 6 months at least, because you've got to get the resident group organized. You've got to get enough participation to make it happen, and that takes time, especially in a bigger park. When I say bigger, I mean, geez, anything over, let's say, 100 spaces. It takes time to track everybody down and get them involved. And so the big question is, everybody's asking, what's it take to get the park owners to the table? And we're going to talk about that in depth in a little bit. And I've learned some stuff. I've been working now for a decade in this area, and I've learned, I think now, what gives you a better chance of getting the park owner to the table. That's a teaser. I'm going to tell you about it in a minute, but not right now. Okay. What's the ownership model that works? The ownership model that works is a resident-owned nonprofit corporation. Now I'm talking about models. I'm not talking about the steps you would take to make this happen. I just want to give you a picture of what the model looks like, first of all. Of those 150 or so resident-owned parks in the state of California, about 80% of them use the model that I'm going to show you. That's how they bought their park. So and here are the steps to that. The first is the residents form a California nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. That's the first step. And then once that's done, the corporation sells memberships to the residents. And those memberships are in the corporation. And then at the close of escrow, that nonprofit corporation owns the park real estate. Now, the critical mass of participation to get a deal done is usually about 70%. What does that mean? That means that for the deal to work, typically, you need 7 out of 10 households to say, okay, I'm going to become a member, which involves 2 things. Buying a membership, number 1, and then number 2, paying a member rent, which is going to be higher than what you paid before. Hopefully not too much higher, but it will be higher. But if you can get 7 out of 10 households to say, this deal works for me, then you're going to succeed. What about the other people, the people that don't join? Well, they just don't join. Nothing else really happens to them. Their new landlord becomes the homeowners association, the corporation. And if you're in an area with rent stabilization, people that don't join are still under rent stabilization. Their rents are still protected by that. What about subdivisions? There was a time when everybody said, gee, we want to own our park. Well, I really want to own my lot. I want to own the dirt under my house. And there was a time, it ended about 15 years ago or so, when subdivisions worked a little bit better. And on rare occasion, they still get done. But the biggest problem with the subdivision is you're not buying a membership in a corporation. You're buying the dirt under your house. You're buying a parcel of land, and that will be expensive. It's not unusual to see in a subdivision the buy-in, buying the dirt under your house, is $125,000. And a lot of people don't have that laying around, number one. Number two, a lot of people don't want to go out and get mortgage financing to try and do that. So the subdivision model doesn't really work very well anymore, and so that's why I'm recommending this other one. Okay, so the big question here. Let's talk about steps. Okay, now actually I'm going to put up the first two, because one of the things that occurred to me over the last 10 years was that I had the steps out of order. And I think now that this is the correct step. I used to have communicate with your park owner being the first thing. And the second thing, choose a park purchase consultant. I've decided that it should be the other way around. And I made that decision after gaining some experience over 10 years about what works. If you're, as a resident group, send a letter to your park owner and say, gee, we really want to buy the park and all that, and we'll pay you top dollar and so on, you probably won't get the park owner's attention because you, as a group, really don't have any credibility. So the best way to do this, I've decided, is the first thing you do is you figure out what park purchase consultant you want to work with. Okay. Now, I work with a gentleman named Dean Sargent, who's from Medford, Oregon, who has done, at this point, I think 52 of these conversions. 52 times he's successfully helped groups buy their park. Dean will also be the first person to tell you he's worked on about 500 of them. So failure is not guaranteed, but you want to, for you to have your best chance of succeeding, you want to get a park purchase consultant that has credibility. So when you reach out to the park owner, you're not just a group of people saying, hey, we want to buy the park. You reach out with a consultant who's done this a bunch of times. And that helps the park owner have the confidence that, God, maybe they can really do this. You know, they've got a guy who's done this before. So, and you can, investigate park purchase consultants. There's not very many of them in California. But I would suggest that for sure you talk to Mr. Sargent. His first name is Dean, D-E-A-N-E. His last name is Sargent, S-A-R-G-E-N-T. And his website, so you can go take a look at it, is PMC Financial Services, all one word, .com. Okay, so that's what I'd suggest. Your first step is find a consultant worker. The next step is to reach out to the park owner. And the next step, you incorporate your residents association. Probably the timing is you do the incorporation when you've heard back from the park owner. I don't advise and you think there might be a deal there. It's debatable whether you should incorporate before you get to that point, because if you become a corporation, you've got to follow protocols and rules, you have to keep minutes, you have to pay taxes, although you have to file a tax return, I should say, because your corporation's not going to make enough money to pay taxes just yet. But if you can get the park owner interested and say, okay, tell me more, then probably that's about the time when you want to become incorporated. The next thing you do is you issue and sell your association memberships. big question is, how much is a membership? And the answer is, I can't tell you. I can tell you a typical range, but I cannot tell you exactly what the membership would be because it's deal specific. The membership price is something that your leadership group in your park, working with, say, Mr. Sargent, would come up with spreadsheet analysis of how the deal might work. And part of that will be, how much money do we need to collect to fill the gap between the price of the park and the mortgage money we're going to get. Because you're not going to get 100% financing. You're trying to get about 90, but you're going to need to raise about 10% of the park purchase price from the people who live in the park. Typical range is somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 to buy a membership. The one other point that's worth knowing is that there's a lot of folks, obviously, who don't have $10,000 or $15,000 in the cookie jar. So Mr. Sargent has a third-party investor. He's not a bank. He's a fellow with a lot of money, frankly, from up in the Sacramento area, and he makes what we call share loans. So if you want to join and become a member of the association, he will loan you up to 95% of the share price. And then, so you put 5% down, that'd be $500 on a $10,000 membership. But then you pay him off over time along with your rent. So that's how that will work. But there's a calculation, I just can't tell you now, other than I'd say an average membership price is probably about $10,000. After you've sold your memberships, the next thing you do is perform property due diligence. And I wish the guy from HCD was still here because we could talk about the condition of parks. Some parks are in better condition than others. Some parks are in really poor condition. And before your corporation buys a park, you want to know what you're buying. It makes sense. So you need to have things inspected, like the roads, the water system, the gas system, the sewer system, the electrical system. You need to figure out what you got, and are there problems there? Are there really expensive problems? You don't want to buy those if you can avoid that. And once you have those inspections done, then you also have a number of what it would take to fix the place up, and you might use that when negotiating with the park owner. Say, geez, this thing needs X amount of dollars to fix up. Can you help us with that? And then, once you're done, you complete the transaction. After you own the park, you will have a professional management company. If you get a loan from a commercial lender, they will require you to have professional management because that park is their collateral for their loan, and they want it managed properly. That's required. Even if you do a deal where the park owner carries the mortgage, he's still going to want you to have a professional management company because his collateral is your park, right, for his mortgage loan. And it's key. The other thing I've learned over the past decade is not all management companies are created equal. So there are management companies that specialize in apartments, condos, and so on. And they don't do very many mobile home parks. You probably want to avoid those management companies because they are not really familiar with the MRL, things like that. So the management company that you pick is critical. Oh, okay. Sources of financing. Okay, let's start with what we call conventional financing. Let's see if this thing works. Ooh, yeah, it does. I don't want to use it too much, but it's kind of fun. Conventional financing, what is that? That would be banks. Everybody knows what a bank is, or like a local community bank or a national bank or whatever. Generally, they are not the best sources, at least for when you're buying the park, because banks are very conservative. And if your group is trying to buy the park, you don't really have any background in owning or running the park, and they might consider you to be too big of a risk. So, and sometimes the terms will be either difficult or impossible to deal with. So banks usually aren't involved, at least at the beginning when you're buying your car. Conduit lender. What's a conduit lender? A conduit lender is a commercial lender who makes mortgage loans, then they package them into a pool and sell that mortgage pool as securities. And conduit lenders, there are several conduit lenders, most of them back east, that are making loans now on original purchases of mobile home parks. The new hot source of conventional financing is Freddie Mac. Now, Freddie Mac is obviously a government program, but Freddie Mac doesn't loan the money. Freddie Mac guarantees loans made by commercial lenders. And I've talked to the folks with Freddie Mac and actually been involved in a couple transactions with them over the last 2 years. And they have told me, we want to do more of these in California. We want to do more mortgages for resident nonprofit corporations buying their parks. So let us know if you run across them. So that's a good source currently. Sources of government financing. Okay, now when I'm talking about government financing, let's start with HUD. There's a program HUD has called the 207M program. This, I kind of miscategorized this because this is also a guarantor type program. In other words, HUD isn't giving you federal money, HUD is guaranteeing a loan by a commercial lender. HUD 207M is the gold standard of great mortgage loans because, for several reasons, but the key one is it's a fully amortizing mortgage. Most of the loans you'll be able to get are commercial loans that the note comes due in 10 years, and at that point you need to refinance your mortgage debt. HUD loans are different. HUD loans can be either 30 or 40 years, and they're fully amortizing. So they're almost like a home mortgage. You pay on it for 30 years or 40 years, and you're done. You never refinance it. So those are truly a great loan. Downside, you're dealing with huge bureaucracy, hard to get, takes a long time. The HUD projects that I've been involved in got scary because HUD wasn't performing fast enough to keep the park seller happy. Like, when are we going to close this deal? You've been working on it for a year now, that sort of thing. So there's always a catch. HCD, MPROP, the MPROP loan. I think Senator Vallejo talked about there being money now, like $40 million sitting in there available. It's very tantalizing. It's great debt. It's a 3%, 30-year fixed rate loan, very tantalizing. But you got to ask yourself, why does so much money pile up in there? Well, the reason is because nobody can really use that money very well. It's very challenging to deal with MPROP. It's another bureaucracy. And when MPROP is involved, it usually doesn't come in as a first mortgage lender. It comes in as a second mortgage lender. So they're maybe contributing 10% to the park purchase price, and some first mortgage lenders providing the big loan. And I've seen problems, unfortunately, where HCD and the first mortgage lender don't play nice together. They don't get along well, and that could put your deal in jeopardy. So I'm not real crazy about HCD's MPROP, but I'd say investigate it, and maybe it fits in there somehow. I just haven't seen it work yet. Community development, financial institutions, and cities and counties. Two other sources of financing that look kind of enticing at first until you realize they really don't have much money. I'm sure you heard your city or county complaining about we don't have much money anymore. In some cases, they may help you with what's called a pre-development loan, which helps you pay for the costs of all your inspections and so on. But that's not the greatest source. Seller financing is a really good thing if you can make it work. In a situation like this, there's no commercial lender involved at all. The seller says, okay, I will basically carry the mortgage. You make the down payment and I'll finance, well, maybe even 90% of the park purchase price. You pay me over time. Now, why would they be so nice? Well, they'd be so nice because it gives them a benefit. And as you'll learn when dealing with park owners, if the deal doesn't work for them, it's not going to happen. There has to be something. You have to offer them something to keep them involved and interested and committed. And the beauty of seller financing is you pay the park owner, who becomes the park seller, you pay them off over time. And that helps them with the capital gains taxes. So they don't get hit in 1 year with millions of dollars in capital gain. So it's a real benefit to them to do what's called an installment sale. Okay. I'm going faster than I thought I was, so we will have time for questions. That's good. Rent stabilization. This is where buying your park and having a rent stabilization law in your city or county starts to blend, and they really work together. Everybody knows rent stabilization. If you've got an RSO, that stabilizes your rents. And that's great and very important. There's something else it does. It stabilizes mobile home park market values. Now, why is that? That's because a mobile home park is a business, and its value is based on the income it generates. So if you hold down rents with an RSO, you also hold down the income that a park generates. And when you do that, it makes it easier to buy them because they get far less expensive. A classic example is Santa Cruz County, where I'm from. We've had a rent stabilization law since 1980. We have 70 mobile home parks. 23 of them are resident-owned. We've got more resident-owned parks than Los Angeles County does. I think Los Angeles City as well. And why is that? That's because we've had rent stabilization helping us since 1980 to keep the values of the parks down. When we bought Aptos Noble in 2005, we paid $4 million for it. And that was its fair market value. And if we had not had that rent stabilization ordinance, the market rents would at that time probably been about $700, $800 a month. The park value would have probably been $1 million more, but it was a lot harder to do it. So that's why rent stabilization is so important. It can make your resident group the best buyer. Let me give you a quick practical example. I worked on a project with Mr. Sargent in 2016 in Soquel. You know where Soquel is?
Yes.
Okay. Santa Cruz County. 150 space park called Alamo Mobile Home Park. They had been through many battles with the park owner over a decade. The park owner had tried to subdivide the park, you know, the old condo scheme, let's sell the lot scheme, and the board of supervisors said, you're not doing that in our county, so he backed off on that. The group, the park owner let the park condition go to hell, so to speak, and they sued him for failure to maintain, and they won that suit, and that was fine. But then they've been battling for years. Finally, the park owner, through a set of circumstances, said, okay, maybe I'll sell to you. I want $13 million for this park. Mr. Sargent sat down with the leadership group in the park and said, you guys can't pay $13 million for it. You can't afford it. It's just too much. What you could have, Mr. Sargent used to be a CPA, so he's always got spreadsheets going and all this analysis going. He says, you can afford to pay $11 million for this mobile home park. So they tell that to the park owner, and the park owner